Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and I'm very excited to welcome Andrew Campbell back to the podcast today to talk about Lady Sings the Blues, starring Diana Ross in an Oscar-nominated performance. How are we doing, Andrew?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me back. I'm excited to talk about this one. It's not a horror movie, so it's gonna be a different vibe today, I feel like.
Yeah, and it's weird because we're recording this on the morning of October 1st, so I kind of feel like we should be talking about something spooky.
I know we really should, but this is fine too, I guess.
But the first time you were on the podcast last year, we talked Sunday Bloody Sunday, which was a big Oscar contender, nominated for Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, and yeah, that was a great conversation. And then I think since we've only talked about horror films, there might have been one more non-horror in the bunch. You've been on a few times. But mostly we've talked about horror films. Our last conversation was about Last House on the Left by Wes Craven, which is a different kind of film than Lady Sings the Blues, right?
It is, yeah. And it's kind of funny you mention it because I was just thinking of that yesterday because I was watching Raising Hope. And the dad in that show plays the evil father in the remake of Last House on the Left.
Oh, okay.
And it made me think of him, and I was just like, God, he's so funny. He's also really hot. And my boyfriend was saying, it's like, I loved Raising Up. The dad was really hot. I was just like, what? And then I watch it now. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I see it. But then, I feel like I can only see him as an evil character now because of that movie and because he was so brutal. Yeah.
You know who's also really handsome? Billy D. Williams, circa 1972.
Oh my God.
And Lady Sings the Blues. I was like, whoa, because we all know him, of course, from Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And about a year ago, we talked about one of his early performances in Brian's Song, which was a TV movie at the end of 71. And that was kind of his first big breakthrough. I would say his next big breakthrough was this movie. Yeah. And then he pops up in a lot of things throughout the decades, but he's most known for, of course, Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, where he's also very dashing.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Boy, is he looking good in Lady Sings the Blues.
Yeah, he came on screen and I was just like, oh, wow. I took my breath away for a second. I was like, he is so handsome. When he gave her that $1, I was like, God, she's so lucky.
So much confidence. He just exudes confidence. And he's like one of the first to really understand who she is and what he could potentially kind of help her with in her career. And this is one of those biopics that I can really get involved with, where it's like, it takes its time. This is a 2.5-hour movie, and we're not in a rush to get anywhere. It's kind of like the beginnings of this very famous singer, Billie Holiday, who we find out how she got the name Billie Holiday in that great scene when she's auditioning. Just kind of seeing her climb the ranks. Like at the beginning, she's just like cleaning houses and she's just trying to, earn $1 where she can, but she's got this talent and we're going to see it to go to really big places as she takes it in this movie. And as we'll talk about, Diana Ross was not the first choice for this role. And there was a lot of people leading up to the film's release were curious if she could pull it off because she was not at the time an actress. Right. Yeah. What's been your history with Diana Ross? Like, what do you like her music or?
Yeah, actually, so I took a music history class in college, and so I did learn about the Supremes a lot. They were a big study of ours. And so I mostly learned about the Supremes more so. Yeah. And then of course, I've known who Diana Ross is. That's from her more independent hits more so.
Right.
And then I was talking to my mom about this. I was telling her that I was gonna do this podcast episode with you, and she was like, oh yeah, and her daughter is Ali. I'm sorry, I always forget her name. She's a Korean name.
I know her.
Blackish.
Oh yeah, Tracy Ellis Ross.
Yes, Tracy Ellis Ross.
From Blackish.
From Blackish, yeah, and it's so funny because I was first of all, she looks just like her mother.
I know she does.
And Diana Ross looks identical.
Yeah.
And because I was watching a bunch of stuff with Diana Ross yesterday on YouTube, and then her daughter, when she won her either Emmy or it was a Golden Globe for Blackish.
Yes.
She had this exact same hairstyle as her mother did, Diana Ross, which she presented at either the Golden Globes or the Oscars, I forget. But I was just like, oh my gosh, it's like seeing the exact same person. It was like laid down in the front and then like really puffy in the back. And it was, oh my god, it was like they're literally identical twins.
Yeah, she's her daughter's so great on Blackish. Diana Ross also has a son who's an actor. I think his name is Evan Ross. He's popped up in a few things. And so it runs in the family. Diana Ross obviously came to her first with her music. My parents loved to play me oldies when I was a kid, and I absolutely loved the Supremes. One of the first CDs I ever owned was like a Supremes, like the best of the best CD. And so I would play that all the time in like fourth grade. So I knew her well. And so, yeah, she's one of those kind of just icons we've known since we were kids. And not everyone thinks of her as an actress because really most of her career has been singing. Did you look at her filmography? She's only in 3 movies.
Yeah, Mahogany and then The Wiz, I guess.
She's in Mahogany in 75. I guess that one doesn't do as well as Lady Sings the Blues. And then she's in The Wiz in 78, which I like. Kind of a flop. Like I feel like that's more of a cult movie. I mean, I feel like of the 3, if you were to ask random people today, most of them would know what The Wiz was, but I don't know if they'd know the other 2 as well. And then she's in 2 TV movies in the 90s, and that's it.
Wow.
And she's so great in Lady Sings the Blues that it kind of surprises me that she's in so few movies. I wonder why that is. I wonder why she didn't take on more roles as an actor.
Because I was reading about her history, and because I just watched The Wiz as well to get more of an idea of like her acting style. And that movie, first of all, I'm sure we'll talk about later. That movie was just bizarre.
You'd never seen The Wiz before?
I've never seen anything but The Wiz before, and I was like, this is insane. But the costuming in that movie, yeah, I'm sure oh my god, phenomenal. But apparently because The Wiz flopped pretty bad, they lost about $10 million on it. That they like, I think that really affected her career. Because they were just saying, they were saying that, of course, the audience for that, they were, wanting to target the Black community with a full Black cast, and then it flopped so hard that they were like, I forgot, did Paramount do that film? I believe they did.
I know Sidney Lumet directed it, but it just didn't perform up to expectations.
Yeah, because I've read that it was like, at that time, it was the highest.
It was like a big budget movie.
$24 million, the biggest musical film they'd done, and I think it made like 14 million total. And they were just like, after that, they were like, well,
and I understand that, and part of it is, I think, some people talk about, like, who are entertainers in other fields like music, they talk about how they don't really like acting because it is so, you have to sit around for hours waiting for the next shot to be lit. And if acting is not your passion, I think especially when you're in another element of entertainment, you just kind of lean into the thing you're really good at and that like people really adore you for. And so I haven't read a quote from her as to why she's not in more, but I would say it's probably because maybe she doesn't really like the actual act of making films and that slow kind of, waiting around all day. Like maybe that wasn't for her. Because she's so good in Lady Sings the Blues. And I'm like, how cool would it have been for her to pop up here and there in like a juicy supporting role in something, or in the 80s and the 90s, like maybe 1 or 2 more like theatrical features in a lead role in something. Like she's got the chops for sure. Like we get to see, she plays, what is at the beginning of the movie, after the prologue, kind of the opening, what is she playing for a while? 14 years old. And it's believable.
It was wonderful. Like her body language is excellent in this movie. Like she did such a great job. Just like she did look like a 15-year-old. Like this, the way she moved and the way her voice, it was really wonderful. And you were saying, I'm hoping that her career ended, or not ended, I don't say like that, that she didn't really act as much as to like on her own terms, because that would just that would be way more understandable. I really hope it wasn't like a they were just like, no, you can't, flopped or done. I really hope it wasn't that, because I feel like it's Diana Ross, you can't. I feel like they wouldn't just like.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of.
Hopefully, it's just with her.
Maybe in the 2 to 3 years after The Wiz, maybe if she had like tried to get another acting project going, there might have been some resistance. But she's so famous and so talented. I think if she had wanted to make film like her second big career, I don't think anything would have stopped her. I think she could have kept going, and she might have hit some resistance here and there. But I mean, obviously, as we need to talk about, telling Black stories on film, it's been, it kind of changes decade to decade. In the early 70s, most of the Black films we're seeing are kind of these Blaxploitation, low budget movies like Shaft and like Superfly, and these kind of like action comedy movies, mostly with men at the lead. Although we are getting to some Pam Grier Blaxploitation movies. We have Coffee in 1973, and then the very famous Foxy Brown in 1974, two movies that Quentin Tarantino was a big fan of, and eventually he made a movie all about Pam Grier with Jackie Brown in 1997. And, we have, every few years we get a really great one that does very well. Like I think of The Color Purple in 1985 by Steven Spielberg, starring Whoopi Goldberg and Oprah Winfrey, and 11 Oscar nominations. But it's hard. It's hard to get movies with a fully Black cast off the ground. And when it doesn't make money, as was the case with The Wiz, which underperformed, it probably might have been hard for Diana Ross to get more projects off the ground over those next few years. And maybe she just said, I'm just going to focus on my music. That's what makes me happy. And that, I mean, absolutely. I don't know, but that's probably what happened. I don't think it was a matter of her saying, I wish I could have been a big actor in film and it just didn't work. I don't think that's what it was.
Yeah.
I would be very surprised.
Yeah.
She is just, I mean, she does everything in Lady Sings the Blues. Like, she's got the great dramatic scenes, both by herself and with other actors. We get her at some point, she's in like this prison cell, screaming at the top of her lungs on the floor. Her hair is like frizzy and crazy, and it's totally believable. And then you have like her evolution, kind of becoming the big musical star she is. And every scene, it's like she's like a little bit, she looks a little bit different, a little bit more regal and polished. And her singing voice is so great. Like, it's just on another level, that I was just so happy to kind of settle into this movie and know that I'm in good hands. Like, she's bringing it on both a dramatic level and a singing level and a dancing level and everything. And she really was the perfect choice in 72 for Billie Holiday. It's a great star turn. I was very happy to see her get so much awards love early the next year.
Oh yeah, and it's funny. I actually watched her win her Golden Globe, and they didn't announce her name when they were.
That's on YouTube.
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Oh, I didn't think they had any Golden Globe clips from the 70s. Like, this one's on there.
Yeah, so he I don't know the young actor who was announcing the winners, but it was like up and coming actors, like actresses, and he didn't list her name when doing it, and then she won, and he was like, wait, he's like, Diana Ross is an up and coming actress. And it was actually a really awkward little moment, because I was just like, ooh, is she? And I was just like, is that like, oh, he didn't know that she was on the list, like it wasn't presented? Or was it like, wait, she's an up and coming, like, she's been around? I don't know how I read it, but he looked a little upset, which I would kind of be upset too. Totally.
So wait, okay. So I just found it. I'm not going to watch it while you're on. I'll look at it later. But so she's nominated for the Golden Globe for Best Actress in is it musical or comedy? I'm assuming it's musical.
Yes. Well, the way they said
it says drama on here. Was it drama?
I guess so, but the way the presenter said it was like up and coming actress, but maybe that was as a commentary that he made himself. I'm not quite sure what he meant by that. But yeah, it's on there. Her speech is real quick.
He reads off the nominees, and he does not say her name. No. And then he says the winner is Diana Ross, and she's there, and she collects the trophy, not looking too happy.
Yeah, unless I like blacked out for 30 seconds of his presenting. but when he said her name, he was so surprised by it, and he's like, "Wait, what?" And yeah, it's an interesting clip. Definitely.
Okay, so I have here that the film received 3 Golden Globe nominations: original score, most promising newcomer female, and best actress in a motion picture drama. She won for newcomer female.
Yes, newcomer female. Yes,
got it.
And that
I didn't know they had any Golden Globe clips from the 70s. I didn't even think to look. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was an awkward video to watch, I will say.
Because it frustrates me because Meryl Streep told this story on one of the talk shows about how she won the Golden Globe in 1980 for Kramer versus Kramer, and she was breastfeeding at the time. And she said she had been away from her child for so long. The ceremony back in 1980 was so long that she started lactating into her dress. And she said she accepts the Golden Globe like with her arms over her like this.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, I want to see this clip. Like, where is it? It's not on YouTube. It's nowhere. So I always thought, the Golden Globe clips don't really start on YouTube until the mid 80s. So I thought maybe they're just not available. But if there's one of Diana Ross in 73, someone find that Meryl Streep clip. I want to watch it.
Come on. I want to. that would be a very powerful, like a great video.
I wonder, having watched the movie now, I wonder why it's she's nominated in the drama category and not comedy or musical, because it really is a musical. I mean, it's a biopic, so maybe they made that choice to go drama. I mean, it's very much a dramatic film, but there's a lot of dance numbers and singing in the movie, so that's kind of interesting. There's some of those things with the Golden Globes, like, is it a comedy, is it a drama? That's a conversation for another day. But she's great in this. And I mean, I think if there's like a weakness or two to the movie, I do think there's like one too many songs. I don't know if you felt this about 2 hours in. I was like, okay, I feel like one or two of the songs could have been replaced with some more dramatic moments, more scenes with Billy D. Williams. But they have a great chemistry together, and the way he kind of he sees what he needs to help her with, and sometimes she has her lows, and he's always there, and he wants her to succeed. And I really like that relationship in the movie. I thought that worked really well. And I just love kind of long form biopics, like where we see them at the beginning and we see them kind of evolve into the person that we know them as, such as the case of Billie Holiday. And again, this is in 1972. Not a lot of like Oscar prestige films are being made with Black ensembles, and here's one of the few, and it's just fantastic, and I wish there were more.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So any scenes, any performances that stood out to you? Kind of what was like your take on this movie overall? Like, what did you like it? Did you not like it?
Yeah, I mean, I thought she was phenomenal. I think like my biggest, what I loved about her, I mean, her voice was beautiful. And I think my biggest miss was her body language. Her body language was really just so good at just showing, when she's confident, when she's not. And probably like, when it starts off and she's 15 years old, and then,
really young.
The way she holds herself, she looks like a child. So in the opening, when then, that horrible man rapes her, I'm happy they did not show that. But the way, I mean, it was so heartbreaking. It's like the first 5 minutes into the movie and you're like, oh my gosh, they're gonna tell a lot. I would say the one issue I had is I had the time jumps. Or like, I was having a hard time tracking of how far along the movie progressed from certain scenes. There were some times where they say, oh, I can't believe I'm playing at the club for a year now. I'm like, okay, it's been a year. Thank you.
You have to like, wait for the dialogue.
You really did, because when she started off, she was 15, and then she's at the club, and then I'm just like, wait, how old is she now? And then I had trouble tracking that. And then when she walked out in that beautiful yellow dress, I was like, how far along are we now? And so that I wish there has been a little more, either like timestamps of like, now it's 1930 something or anything that would have been really beneficial. And I think one other thing that I also had, which had been better, was something that's weren't explained well enough. And I think maybe that is because maybe people watching this film in the 70s kind of know her story a lot, so they don't need the explanation. But watching it now, after 50 years, I'm like, wait, what's going on with that? And I think it's maybe I wasn't brought up on it. I didn't know when these events were taking place, so I don't know about it now. Which makes some things hard to track. But I think, in the 70s, it would have been much easier to track it because you may have already lived it and you know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have two minds of that. I understand when you get kind of confused as to, okay, has this been a year since the last scene? Is this the next day? I do feel like sometimes you need those timestamps. At the other side of it, I don't want to watch a 2-hour movie where every scene or two they're putting like the date, like, May 1933, November 1934, like every few minutes. You don't want that either. So I feel like that's the job of the director to make it clear. If we're jumping around over many years, we need to make it clear. We don't need to know the exact year or time we're in, but know that time has passed since we last saw her. And I agree, there's some moments in the movie after she starts becoming Billie Holiday and a big entertainer star. Sometimes I was like, wait, how long has passed since she sang that song in the previous scene? There was a little of that, but at a certain point, you just have to just let the movie take you with it and just know that you'll be a little confused as to where we are. And not too much time can pass because, her physical look doesn't change too much.
Yeah.
So it's not like I just watched for the first time in many years, Mr. Holland's Opus with Richard Dreyfuss. You ever seen that movie from the 90s? He plays a music teacher. He starts teaching in 1965, and the movie ends with his retirement in 1995. And the movie throughout the 2.5 hours similarly does big time jumps, but there are timestamps. And so you always kind of know, like, okay, this is 81. Oh, okay, now we're to 95. But the movie makes it so every time we see him, where we have a time jump of 5 to 10 years, like he has a completely different physical look. So
he puts glasses
on, and then we get to 95 and he's like full gray, and it's like, okay, this is later.
What it makes me think of the movie Boyhood, which I love.
Boyhood.
And I love Patricia Arquette.
No timestamps
because you don't need, you can just like, oh, this kid is actually aging. But one of my favorite parts of that movie was I was a huge fan of the show Medium that Patricia Arquette was in.
Yeah.
I think it lasted like 6 years, I believe. And she had a lot of different haircuts throughout that show. It was like because I know like within the show, she has a brain tumor later on. And so they cut her hair really, she like shaves her head. And then it gets really short and she has all these different haircuts. And I loved watching Boyhood. And I was just like, that's season 4 of Medium now because
season 4 haircut.
And her hair would always change, and I'm like, oh wait, I wonder if they did that for maybe Boyhood instead of for Medium. And I was just like, it's funny that this hairstyling, it's just like the key factor you need when it comes to like, I think more so for women as well, because women usually grow their hair much longer than men do. I was like, okay, I know that we're jumping around because their hair is short, then it's long, then it's like that, and then it's like that. But
you'll like this. So I knew, like, when we got to year 9 of Boyhood, when he's shot up and he's like much older, and then we go into the house and I'm like, oh, that's the Patricia Arquette hairstyle from the Scream 4 premiere. Like she was there supporting David Arquette, her brother, and on IMDb for years it was the picture of her at the Scream 4 premiere.
Aww.
And it's her hair she has in year 9 of Boyhood. And I went, oh, that's the Scream 4 premiere hair.
Well, I'm happy we can relate on that. And of course, we brought Scream into the conversation, as we always do.
Oh, I already mentioned Last House on the Left. We always.
Always comes around.
But and I think for Lady Sings the Blues, I think they did a good job of not making her physical look so drastically different throughout the movie. It was more about like how she carries herself and her presence and her wardrobe, and how she is on stage at the beginning versus how she is for the last like dazzling musical number. Like her last song at the end is such a great way to go out. I knew it was going to end like that. I was like, this movie has to end with her like just delivering one tremendous song at the end, and then just like wide shot of the audience jumping to their feet. And it's like, but if all the movie was just her singing and, you know, maybe a couple little dramatic, like the movie is more than just the singing. And that's what I responded to. We really do get a full kind of biopic of this woman's life. And I think everyone involved with the movie gives it their best. I looked up the director, who I don't think anyone would know the name, Sidney J. Furie. But if you look at his filmography on IMDb, it goes all the way back to the 1950s as a director, and he has just completed a new movie.
Today?
Not today. It says on IMDb that he has a completed film called Finding Hannah. He had a film released in 2018. He is, how old is he? He was born in 1933. So he is 89 years old.
Wow. And
insane. He directed his first thing in 1957, and he's still making movies. Isn't that cool?
That's impressive.
So let's see. I mean, he has tons of credits. I mean, not a lot of them are popping out. Let's see. The last 20 years, I don't see any titles that My Five Wives with Rodney Dangerfield. I don't think that would be at the top of his career. Oh my God, he directed Ladybugs with Rodney Dangerfield. Have you seen Ladybugs?
I'm not.
That was a childhood favorite of mine. It's Rodney Dangerfield, great comedian. To impress his boss, like to get a raise, he agrees to coach like their daughter or their son, their daughter's soccer team. And some of it hasn't aged well, because like his son like puts on a wig and takes part in the girls' soccer team. So there's a lot of like gender jokes that maybe don't hold up 30 years on. But if you like Rodney Dangerfield, it's worth a look. And then let's see, in the 80s, he directed Superman 4 with Christopher Reeve, that terrible sequel. Have you seen Superman 4?
I've not seen, no. I haven't seen any. Honestly, I'm not a big Superman fan.
Okay.
I've only really seen the one that was like in the early 2000s with that one.
Oh, Brandon Routh, Superman Returns.
Yes, I've seen that one, because now he's on the CW in that Superman show, or he was like in the time jumping thing. And then I've seen Man of Steel, which I did not like, unfortunately, as much as I love Christopher Nolan. And
Superman's had a rough go. There haven't really been any good ones, except for I think the first two with Christopher Reeve, Superman from 78 and Superman 2 from 1980. Those are great movies, just really fantastic. So, two of my favorite comic book movies ever. And then Christopher Reeve makes two more, Superman 3 in 83 and Superman 4 in 87, and 3 and 4 are not good.
Oh no.
Superman 4 is hilarious because right before they started shooting, they lost like a lot of the budget. All the money that was going to go to visual effects got kind of wiped out. And so there's this battle to the death for the last 20 minutes of Superman 4, where they're like in space, and it looks so fake. You are, if you're not on the floor roaring with laughter, something is wrong with you. So it's a good like party. It's a good party movie. Like you said, you're gonna do Hocus Pocus 2.
I watched that one after.
If you need a fun movie for a group to watch, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace.
Is that the one where he flies backwards to reverse the Earth so that he goes back in time?
That's the first one.
Oh, that's the first one. Okay.
And it's also in the end of Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut. There's two versions of Superman 2.
Oh, wow.
Richard Donner was directing Superman 1 and 2 at the same time, and they fired him towards the end of the process. I think he had shot about 60 to 70% of Superman 2, and they fired him, and they brought on this other guy to finish the movie. And so the film that came out in 1980 was the other director's film, and he had shot a lot more comedy stuff, whereas the Superman 2 Richard Donner was making was more serious. And so in 2006, I think was it the last project that he ever did? Like he got a hold of all of his footage from 79 or whatever it was, and they managed to create a new Richard Donner cut that's more in line with his vision for what the sequel was going to be. And it's a really interesting comparison to the movie they released in 1980 to the Richard Donner cut from 2006. But anyway, that's a long.
That sounds like that sounds like the same like Justice League situation with.
Yeah, it's kind of like Justice League
Snyder,
and Zack Snyder like creating his own cut. It's kind of what happened with Richard Donner and Superman 2. And then, I mean, what else? What else has this director made? So, Lady Sings the Blues in '72 is our film for today. Before that, he made a Robert Redford movie, kind of under the radar movie called Little Faust and Big Halsey. It's like this director is so interesting. He made the Iron Eagle movies; those were kind of popular in the '80s. This is such an interesting director in that he's like a workhorse director, has prolific number of titles, and it's mostly films I've never heard of. And it's just like someone was able to make a career for himself over 60 plus years, making one movie after another, still working to this day. He's almost 90. And there's not really like a big classic film on his resume.
Yeah.
You think there'd be one. For a man to be directing films in the 60s and 70s and 80s, you think there'd be one or two big films that we would know. And there's not. I mean, for Superman 4 to in some ways be his most famous movie is kind of crazy.
I'm looking at it right now.
The Ipcress File from 1965 is a semi well-known film, I want to say. And then I'm looking, there's like 10 other titles of the 60s. I don't recognize any others. And so we get to the 70s. He makes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 films. And of those titles, the only one that I would have heard of months before now is Lady Sings the Blues. I knew of this film because of the Diana Ross Oscar nomination. I'm a big Oscar buff, and I've gone through all the books and stuff. And I was intrigued by this one because it is her only Oscar nomination and only one of 3 theatrical movies. What do you think the director brought to this? Anything that you thought Sidney J. Furie brought to this movie? I mean, it's hard to say without seeing his other work. Like, what kind of? I don't know if he brought any kind of personal stamp to it, but like anything he does as a director to make the movie work. What do you think?
I mean, I was always watching an interview. Diana Ross did an interview. It was definitely like in the 2000s, possibly, or in the 90s. And she was discussing Lady Sings the Blues and like what she brought to the table and like how she changed a lot of like aspects of Billie Holiday, which I think was interesting. I think it's interesting that the director Sidney was okay with like allowing Diana Ross to actually do more of a portrayal of what she wanted to do versus like the actual portrayal of Billie Holiday. And I don't know, I feel like one issue I also had with the movie is that she had 3 husbands throughout her life, and we only got to see McKay, who was actually her very last husband, and she didn't see anyone before that. And I was just like, wait, I was a little confused on. I was like, wait, is this more of a biopic or more like, or I mean, I feel like her having 2 husbands for him would have been a pretty significant deal. And we didn't get to meet them. And I was like, I thought it was a little odd that, you know, the director was like, oh, we don't need to include them, even though they were much more in her life than McKay was. And apparently he was not. I mean, just reading some articles about him, he wasn't exactly the best husband in the world. And they made him look like a knight in shining armor in this. I mean, he is gorgeous and like just charming and so strong and like just so protective and loves her so much. But apparently it was not that way the entire time. But I feel like maybe that comes with the time, with the 70s. Maybe they're trying to build a different kind of story. Because I started watching a little bit of the United States versus Billie Holiday on Hulu last night. And it's a very different vibe. And some of the these real life people have a much different character and or personified very differently than they were in Lady Sings the Blues. But it's interesting that City did kind of, maybe he changed a little bit of the characters to make it more theatrical or maybe just more relatable. Because I know Harry in Lady Sings the Blues versus the United States versus Billie Holiday are like very different people. Like it's interesting, and it makes me even want to know. Okay, so which one is more accurate? Like which one is more accurate to these characters? Is it the one from the 70s or from 2000? I believe 2021 was when the new Billie Holiday movie came out.
Yeah, it's such a tricky conversation. I mean, I had it last night when I was watching the new movie Blonde on Netflix, which is about Marilyn Monroe, and it's apparently just like a fictionalized kind of movie about her life in terms of like the dramatic scenes that go into her personal life. A lot of it's just made up for the movie, and it's a tricky thing. It's like, do I need to watch a movie about someone who really existed, and every scene to scene has to be exactly to what really happened? I don't necessarily need that, but sometimes depending on the style, it's not clear how much of this is reality and how much of this are they just adding to the script of their own, their own making. And so, I mean, I feel like the Lady Sings the Blues biopic here, it seems pretty true to life. And so for them to exclude major people from her life in the narrative, I mean, maybe it's just they had to keep the movie down to 2.5 hours, and maybe as they did with Lincoln and some of these films where they're just going to focus on a segment of their life and not tell you the whole story. But we do get scenes with her at a young age, and we get the fantastic scene of her auditioning to be a dancer in that show. That was maybe my favorite scene of the movie, when she's like
oh my gosh,
when she's auditioning to dance, and she just like kind of wanders into, what are there, 6 to 10 women already dancing, and then she's just kind of in the middle. She's not really keeping up with what they're doing. She's kind of doing their own thing. She's doing her own thing, and the guy's like, yeah, hit the road. Like, we're not that's not gonna work. And but then
she has the voice.
She has the voice, and she gets that guy to play a song, and then she starts singing, and the man says, I know what to do with you. I'm going to have you be a singer here. And as long as you don't make the people leave my establishment, maybe we can make a deal here. The way that Diana Ross plays that scene, that felt very real to me. I mean, I don't know what happened and how she got her name, because he's asking her what her name is, and she says it. She says her real name, and he's like, what, Eleanor, she says. And she just like glances down at that what he's holding, like a pamphlet in his hands or something, and she sees the word Billy.
Like it was like Billy Grove,
yeah, and she says Billy, and then she pauses, Holiday. and that's like how
actually, I believe the reason it was Holiday is because her father's last name was Holiday, but spelled differently. It was like Halliday. So I believe maybe her father was not involved in her life, apparently. So I think that was where the Holiday came from. So I'm assuming. I was like, well, that can't just be a coincidence. But I guess he just spelled it,
So yeah, I mean, so when you get the beginnings, I feel like we need to see, at least in some part, like all of the major elements of like how she came to be who she was. So it is an interesting choice that they would have erased 2 important men in her life. I don't know why that is.
Yeah. I thought that was very very interesting as well. I know the lynching scene was was awful, and you can tell it just affected her so much, obviously. And then she wrote the song Strange Fruit from that. From that scene. And now when I watched, so when she performed that song, I didn't really pay much attention to it, because I didn't really know what it was about. But then when I was watching United States versus Billie Holiday, that song "Strange Fruit" was actually extremely controversial. And they would not, and no one would ever play it. And because it was, people believe that it was, a form of protest and all this stuff. And of course, these horrible white racists and members of the KKK, they are like, that was a huge like she received so many death threats and all this because of that song. And I feel like, you know, I feel like that would have been an important part to have in this film as well. Because I think maybe, again, like at the time, people watching it in the 70s, they know about that song, they know the controversy, they know everything about it, so they don't need to explain it. But now watching it 50 years later, I didn't understand that aspect of that song. And I feel like they didn't even show that there was controversy around that song. And then yeah, I feel like that would have been a very powerful moment to have or explain the importance of that song and how controversial it was. But of course, maybe the 70s, they don't want to get into that. I'm sure. It's, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thankful this movie was made when it was. I feel like this had been made 10 years before. I don't feel like it would have hit as hard, like especially with some of those later scenes, like when she's you know, taken in by the authorities, and I feel like that would have been kind of sentimentalized, or kind of like it wouldn't have hit as hard as it does in this movie, when in 72 you can really show pretty much anything you want to at this point.
Yes, you could.
As we've seen in Last House.
Oh yeah.
But apparently Dorothy Dandridge was the star in the role of Billie Holiday in an earlier proposed film version, but she died before the film was ever made. Dorothy Dandridge is very famous, being the first woman of color, the first Black woman to get an Oscar nomination for Best Actress, which she got in 1955 for the film Carmen Jones. And she was the first one until Diana Ross and Cicely Tyson both were nominated in 73. This is the first of two times that two Black actresses were nominated the same year for Best Lead Actress at the Academy Awards. The first time was Cicely Tyson for Sounder, which that episode would have aired last week. So that was last week's episode. And then, of course, Diana Ross for Lady Sings the Blues. And then it happens a second time in 2021. Viola Davis gets in for Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. And Andra Day gets nominated for playing Billie Holiday in the United States versus Billie Holiday. Isn't that weird?
I would
that it
say
happens
Andra
twice,
also,
and both times someone's nominated for Billie Holiday.
That's, I mean, the history repeating. So that's, and I would say Andra Day is phenomenal. Like what I've seen so far, I haven't watched the entire, I haven't finished all of it, but she is phenomenal. It's a very different take of Billie Holiday as well. And I'm looking forward to finishing it, because it's a very different perspective. So that is wild that, like, Billie Holiday portrayals
get recognized. But there was a lot of firsts too for this movie. If I just read this through real quick. So this was the first African-American biopic to be nominated for Academy Awards. This was the first one, like a biopic. It earned 5 nominations, including Best Actress. So it was nominated for Best Score Adaptation, Art Direction, Costume Design, Original Screenplay, which I feel is kind of an interesting nomination for this movie, that it was recognized for its script.
Yeah,
like, it's not what that, if I wouldn't have assumed that would have been one of the 5. So that's kind of interesting. And then Best Actress for Diana Ross. And the movie got some Golden Globe nominations for original score. We talked about that. Most Promising Newcomer Female, she won. She was also nominated for the BAFTA Award for Best Actress. And so this was like her one and only time kind of flirting with Oscar victory. She, I think, was probably in second place, if I had to guess. But this is the year. Yeah. This is the year of Cabaret and Liza Minnelli. I don't think anyone was going to beat Liza Minnelli in Cabaret.
No, definitely not.
As of this recording, my next Oscar video for my YouTube channel, making my 10 favorite Oscar wins of the 1970s in acting, and Liza Minnelli is my second choice of the whole decade. So I think that is a stellar performance, iconic performance, and also a musical, a movie that won 8 Oscars. That one was just taking over everything. So I think this movie, Lady Sings the Blues, just came out in the wrong year. I think if Lady Sings the Blues had come out in 1973, I think Diana Ross could have had a good shot.
Absolutely.
Because Glenda Jackson from Sunday Bloody Sunday wins Best Actress for A Touch of Class, which is kind of like a so-so movie from what I've read and what I've heard. And she had already won Best Actress 3 years before for a movie called Women in Love. So I don't know if the Academy voters, they were like necessarily like, we have to give Glenda Jackson a second one. I think she's, Diana Ross is pretty dazzling in this. She shows so many shades to her talent, not just in singing, but also with her dramatic chops. And some of those later scenes, especially in the prison, that I feel like she could have won if this had come out in like February of 73. If they waited 5 months, this came out in October of 73. If they just pushed it to spring, she would have had a pretty good
you know what? I'm wondering, because Diana Ross was so phenomenal. And I feel like the last 45, it's a long movie. The last 45 minutes, I feel like she went to like the next level. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if they filmed any of this chronologically at all. And because I felt like the scene with the piano man,
Richard Pryor, an early Richard Pryor performance.
He was phenomenal.
He's great.
I loved him in this, and he's later in Wiz, which I thought they popped up.
Right.
I was like, is that the piano man playing the wizard? And I love the scene that they have together. One, when we find out that Billie Holiday's mother had died. Great performances on both ends, and Richard's performance, like he's so like, it comes off so naturally, like the way he does it, like his mannerisms are so like fascinating, and just like I was very invested in him. And then of course the scene where unfortunately he gets beaten to death. That was a tough scene. That was super tough. Oh yeah. And it was a very hard scene to watch. And like Diana Ross's performance during that scene and then everything after, to me, it was like the best of her acting I had seen in the movie.
Yeah.
It felt so different in a way where I can't even explain it. Like,
well, I feel like she's given more to do dramatically in the last 45 minutes than she does she's obviously a gifted singer. Like in terms of her singing in the movie, there's nothing there that we wouldn't expect, but we're not expecting those really heavy dramatic scenes of her just no makeup, her fighting, her screaming, her hair a mess when she's in that cell. Like that's the Diana Ross nobody had seen before, who I think a lot of critics and people were like, can she pull this role off? Like, can she do the dramatic stuff? And it turned out she could. So that was kind of a revelation to people.
Yeah, and the scene when Billy D. Williams comes to get her after Piano Man had been killed, it was such a strong scene, and I think that was one of my favorite ones of her, because it just, I don't know, like it felt like she got seemed so exhausted, and it could have been maybe even like her real life just exhaustion of all this emotion she's been having to act out, and she gets a moment to like almost like grieve and just I don't know. I really love that scene. It really stood out to me, and it really like turned me on to like, oh my god, no, she's a phenomenal actress. At first I thought some of her acting was a little too
little too mannered,
a little too frantic and just like all over the place, and I didn't really know how I felt about it. And then also when I was also looking at pictures of Billie Holiday and then the way she was, I was like, I feel like this doesn't match very well. But then how Diana Ross, like, she kind of wanted to make it more so her own, that kind of got me in a different mindset, and I respected it differently. And I mean, she was amazing. And those last 45 minutes though, I really, really, it impressed me really did impress me. And
yeah,
I loved, in the other scene I also loved, I'm looking at my notes, when she does come back to the bar in the yellow dress. She was just to me it was like a Cinderella moment, is how I like felt it. She comes down looking phenomenal, and she's like smoking her cigarette. She's just like, I want on. It's like she's so confident. I was like, ooh, I was like, I love this. And then she goes and dances, and her dancing just is not
it's
good
so
at
bad.
all. It's so bad. And I was like, oh,
but she's got a grin on her face.
But she does, yeah. Oh yeah. And she was so confident, and she was like, I don't know what I'm doing. But then she sings and of course blows everybody away. I love that. I thought it was really fun just to see like her, put on act real fast, and then, kind of embarrass herself a little bit, and then she's like, "No way, I'm confident in my singing. Let me show that." I just got the movie started, and of course the following scene when she is singing for the first time at the club, and everyone is giving her money, but she's like kind of she doesn't want to do it with her thighs. She wants to hand it and like take it with her hands, and that was a really hard scene to watch. You just felt for her so much, because she the life that she has had prior to that, and
being a sex object and a kind of a prostitute, and she wants nothing to do with that. That was a powerful segment of the movie.
Oh yeah. And then and she was just like, and she refused, and she didn't do it, and then people like gained some respect for her in that moment, and she held her ground, which I think really just kind of stepped her up in the, becoming this woman that everyone just fell in love with.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Richard Pryor. I wanted to talk about him briefly because he is really known as a comedic actor. He made a lot of comedies. I want to say starting in like 76, I want to say it's called Silver Streak. And he made a bunch of movies with Gene Wilder. And in the 80s, he was like a comedy superstar. Like he was one of the big African-American comedian actors in the world. And watching him play a dramatic role in Lady Sings the Blues was really great, because I've seen him do drama in a couple things. He has a dramatic role in Lost Highway by David Lynch, of all movies. Like he can't, like, I love when people mostly known for comedy stretch in, a dramatic role here and there. Rodney Dangerfield, who I mentioned before, only did comedy his entire career. And then he plays this one extremely vicious dramatic role in an Oliver Stone movie, Natural Born Killers from 1994. And it's uncomfortable to watch. Like, because it's like, this guy, we've only known him as Funny Man. And for like 2 scenes of that movie in the beginning, he plays this like rageaholic, alcoholic, abusive father. And it's like really hard to watch. You're like, of all actors who have been cast in this role, we get comedian Rodney Dangerfield. And so
I feel like it's so hard to do. Like it's also a lot of pressure on the actor. It's like, oh, everyone knows me as Funny. How can I even be this insane character?
And so I'm always happy when you have an Adam Sandler doing Uncut Gems, when you have an actor who is known for one thing. So not to say that this was after that. This is before he became a big comedy superstar. But it was nice to see him in a more subtle, dramatic role in this movie. And because I've always really enjoyed him as a comedy actor. I've seen a lot of his work. But I thought he was really good in this too. And I think I don't think he's in the movie quite enough to have been considered for like supporting actor nominations and things like that. But he brings a lot to the movie too. And Billy D. Williams is really great. I mean, I need to read more on the history of Billie Holiday to really get it, because I do think that would put me off a bit if they're trying to make him into a knight in shining armor when in reality he was not so great to her. That's kind of an odd choice. I wonder if part of the reason was they wanted to not focus on 3 different men and just like have the focus be on the last one who kind of played a big role in her life. Maybe was part of it, but yeah, I mean, if you don't know all of the history of her life, I don't think that's something you're aware of while you're watching Lady Sings the Blues. It's not something that stood out to me. I thought he was really great. And we talked about his career when we looked at Billy's Brian's song last year. And he's in a lot of stuff, but it's kind of a lot of under the radar. this is one of his very few kind of big roles in a major Oscar movie, would be Lady Sings the Blues, and I thought he did a great job too.
He did, he really did. I mean, I fell in love with the guy.
He's
and
so
now,
smooth, man. He's just
he
like, hey,
is.
with his
He's
mustache,
with his mustache and this,
his
like,
hat.
Oh my god, yeah. I loved him, and I love to watch. I mean, I would like to see them again in Mahogany. You know, he plays her love interest in it.
Right. They reunite for Mahogany.
Yeah, it seems like, unfortunately, it's very much the exact same to me, the exact same premise. Where I think she's I haven't seen Mahogany. I watched the trailer for it earlier. And like, you know, she wants to become a fashion designer, and she has to she, you know, is they call it a rags to riches story. And, you know, she ends up becoming this huge successful designer in Paris, I believe. And he's her love interest, and he's like, I just love you, and I want to take care of you, and all that stuff. And so I would like to see them again, to see how their chemistry is in this one. And, you know, I'm sure they've been friends, and just seeing if, you know, if it was like even a next level. But I know, like, when I was reading about his character McKay, and apparently he got her also, like, into drugs as well. And I was like, well, that's the complete opposite of what Lady Sings the Blues is saying. And so that I definitely do want to do more research on that as well, because it's like I was like, oh no, like, is the character I love not even real? Like, is this portrayal of him? Like, I was a little heartbroken when I was reading all these things. And when I was watching The United States versus Billie Holiday, the actor from Moon Knight, oh my gosh, who plays the oldest version of Tyrone, he plays,
I'm gonna pull it
up. He's in United States versus Billie Holiday, and his name is Jimmy, as was her Billie Holiday's her first husband was Jimmy something. In this movie, he plays Jimmy Spector, who ends up actually being a police officer.
Trevante like, Rhodes.
Yes, yeah, he's phenomenal. And I'm interested to see, like, they were telling, you know, they're making it seem like I thought it was gonna be her husband, because his name is Jimmy as well, but apparently it's not. And I'm just like, okay. Sometimes I get a little frustrated when films when it's a biopic, but when they do change a lot of stuff. It's like, well, is this even a biopic anymore? Because I'm just like, these characters are completely different than who they really were. It does throws me off and disappoints me a little bit, because, you know, I want, with those things, you know, you kind of want the true story. It can be, you know, elaborated a little bit, but changing the whole story of them is quite a stretch.
And then sometimes it can be a little too real. I've just watched the first 2 episodes of Dahmer on Netflix, have you seen that?
I have not, but I've heard so.
And it's like the first episode is like in real time, like him taking one of those guys back to his apartment, and it's like there's no cutting away. It's just like you are stuck with these two for like 40 minutes while he seduces the guy to his bedroom where there's a corpse, and then he, like, you know, the guy can't escape, and it's like you see it all in real time. There's no cutting, and it's like this is probably pretty close to how it happened, and it's so hard to watch. And so then there's that side of things where they're not sentimentalizing or anything. Like, it's just here, like, cameras just kind of locked off, and here's what happened. And so there's that side of things too. And then there's the other side, which is Blonde, which is the story of Marilyn Monroe. And you're watching this movie and you're like, how much of this is real? Very little. I think, you know, a lot of the dramatic scenes, they look to be embellishing or even making it up. And I read yesterday that it is a fictionalized account of her life. So it's tricky. It's like, when it's someone that we know, it's like, okay, so if it's fictionalized, what are you bringing to it that makes it worth watching? Like, what are we supposed to take away from it? If it's about a real person, but we're not seeing all of the reality of how they came to be, who they were. So that's kind of tricky.
And what's interesting with the United States versus Billie Holiday is it starts off, she's already famous. Like, she's already up there and making money, selling out shows. And so it's a very different perspective to see you don't see, you don't get an hour.
You don't get the 14-year-old.
No, you don't. Yeah, you don't get that. You get her when she is famous and she's selling out. So, the movie already has a much different vibe than Lady Sings the Blue does, and I'll definitely finish The United States versus Billie Holiday, just to see. I want to compare and contrast them hardcore. So it's interesting to see some major differences between characters, and also just the portrayal of Billie Holiday is very different. Andra Day Andra Day looks just like her. She looks so, perfect, just like physical casting. And her performance is really good. It's very different than Diana Ross's, and but both good and bad. There's some things I'm like, I like when Diana Ross did that a little bit more, and kind of
and real quick about Mahogany, I definitely want to watch it. I didn't get a chance to this last week to kind of compare it with Lady Sings the Blues. It'd be an interesting comparison since it is also Billy D. Williams too, but it looks like just looking at the IMDb, it looks like it's not a musical. It's like about a fashion designer. It looks like there isn't singing in it. So maybe that was like Diana Ross stretching and saying, okay, I'm gonna make a movie where there isn't any singing. That's what everybody knows me for. And then the movie didn't do well, so maybe then she's like, okay, if I do another movie, we'll do a musical. So then she does The Wiz.
Yeah,
that doesn't do well, and so she's probably like, okay, I'm gonna go back to music. So Lady Sings the Blues kind of. This movie combines all of her talent, like she's able to do the dramatic stuff and the singing, and it's all in a nice package. Whereas The Wiz doesn't really have any great dramatic moments. It's basically it's like a big spectacle musical. I watched it. Was it 2 years ago? I did a year of Sidney Lumet. Every January, I pick a director and I watch their films in chronological order over 12 months. And I did Sidney Lumet, who made in the 70s films like Dog Day Afternoon and Network and some of the great classic films of the 70s. And then I'm like, oh, he directed The Wiz. I guess we're watching The Wiz for the first time. I had seen clips, but I never watched it all the way through. And that is a bonkers movie. That movie is like,
oh my God.
Some of those musical numbers are so big and crazy. And it's just like, they couldn't do The Wizard of Oz again. It had to be different. They couldn't just remake Wizard of Oz. I don't think anyone ever could to this day. No. I would be surprised if there was ever a new Wizard of Oz in the style of the 39 movie. So they had to kind of go big and different. And she's great in the movie, but it's not like the kind of role where she can really show off her dramatic chops the way she does in Lady.
Yeah, I liked her in Lady Sings the Blues much more. Wasn't a big fan of the cinematography for The Wiz. The costuming and the makeup and all that stuff, and the design of everything, I loved that. It was so cool. Like when the whole subway started, I felt like I was on drugs, and I have not done a drug a day in my life. And I was like, this is what it would be like, I bet. Because like when the pillars in the subway start like coming off the walls and they're walking around, and the trash cans start moving, I've truly have not really seen anything like that before. And it was just fascinating, and I was like, it definitely kept me invested. But they had so many it was just wide shots the entire time. And when they were dancing, you don't see their faces. Their back was always toward the camera. And that drove me crazy. I was like, I'm sorry. I was just like, I get, they're walking away, but like different angle, please. It was just so many wide shots and stuff, which I'm sure why the movie was so expensive to make, because when you got a wide shot, you got to have all this awesome design and sets and stuff. And I didn't get to see. I wanted to see at least some more detail within the dancing, the choreography. Like when everything's so far, I was just like, I gotta squint my eyes. I can't see any of this stuff. And them just facing away from the camera during a lot of the dance numbers, that bothered me a lot.
Would it be shocking for you to learn that one of the Wiz's 4 Oscar nominations is Best Cinematography?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh no.
Along with art direction, costume design, and Best Music, which would make sense.
Ease on Down the Road was fun as hell. I love
Ease
that.
on Down the Road. Did we like the Michael Jackson performance?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I think it was fine. It was. I thought it was. I really love the element with him when he pulls out. He's stuff with a newspaper instead of straw. And I loved when he would pull out quotes from his like chest or his arm, and it would be some like super awesome quote or just like a silly little thing. And I love that. That was really fun. Yeah, he definitely did a fantastic job, and Diana Ross did a great job in that one as well. But her acting chops, I feel like were portrayed so much better in Lady Sings the Blues. Because I mean, her singing was great in The Wiz, but I think honestly, I think the cinematography for the Wiz was you never had much up close shots of her and her emotions and all these things. It was always as far out, and when the three, the four of them were all together, the Lion, Tin Man, Scarecrow, and her and Toto, they were pretty much all on screen together the entire time, which I just felt like just didn't.
Oh yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I think
I wanted more time individually with each of them on camera. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
I think part of the problem with The Wiz was that it was very much outside of Sidney Lumet's wheelhouse as a director. Like, he was not known for musicals. I mean, you look at Dog Day Afternoon 3 years before, and that's a really gritty crime drama, intense. And then it's like he's making this like this bouncy musical movie. It's very strange. And I don't know if he was the right guy to really in terms of like filming musical number to musical number. Maybe he wasn't the right choice for that material. Maybe more of a seasoned like musical director would have been better for that movie. Maybe it would have popped a little more. I had fun with it. I remember I watched it in the last few years. I remember I was entertained by it, but it definitely is a flawed movie.
It's flawed, but
I like that we have a Diana Ross trilogy. Like, she made 3 movies in the 70s, and that was it, outside of some TV stuff. So we have like this trilogy of her work on film, and that's it. Call it a day.
That's easy. Call it a day. Yeah.
But yeah, I think the one that could have won her the Oscar was Lady Sings the Blues. I don't know if you've seen the clip of her at the Oscars, but she's very made up, and she looks like she wants to win. Like, sometimes, I mean, they're actors. You don't really, sometimes they're just kind of like smiling for the camera, and when they say her name, it's like we get a close-up of Diana Ross, and she's sitting there. She's not really smiling or she's just, you can tell she wants to get up out of her seat and go up on that stage. And so when they announced Liza Minnelli Cabaret, she's kind of like, okay. But it's so cool to see her with Cicely Tyson there, 2 Black actors nominated for Best Actress at the Academy Awards. I mean, it was just unprecedented. Especially for 1973. So I really love that about this year in film, is that we get 2 completely, like, wildly different performances. Cicely Tyson is very quiet and understated for all of Sounder, outside of one scene where her husband, who's been away for a year, comes home, and she just starts jumping and screaming and runs after him to go hug him. It's mostly kind of like a restrained performance. It's very powerful. When she's feeling pain, she doesn't like, it's not an Ana de Armas blonde performance where Ana de Armas is crying in almost every scene for 3 hours of that movie, which I watched last night.
Exhausting.
Cicely Tyson's more kind of understated performance in Sounder, but it's such like a great like double feature, and it's kind of cool that I'm releasing both episodes back to back for Film at 50, and that they're 2 films with Black ensembles that are very different in every way, in terms of the story they're telling, and in terms of the tone. And so I mean, it's not going to change the industry, but good things are happening at this point. 50 years ago, for films with Black actors, like, doesn't all have to be Superfly and Blackula, both of which we talked about last summer. God, I don't know if you've seen or heard of those movies.
I've heard of that Blackula.
Blackula. These are 2, Lady Sings the Blues and Sounder, are much more kind of powerful, dramatic epics that I just was really taken with both. And the critics at the time liked this movie. Roger Ebert gave it 3 stars. He wrote that Ross had given one of the great performances of the year. says the film has some of the cliches we expect, but do we really mind cliches in a movie like this? I don't think so. Gene Siskel gave it 3 stars. He said the fact that Lady Sings the Blues is a failure as a biography doesn't mean it can't be an entertaining movie. And it's just that entertaining because of Diana Ross. And then Pauline Kael wrote that when the movie was over, I wrote in my notes, I love it. Factually, it's a fraud, but emotionally, it delivers. It has what makes movies work for a mass audience. Pleasure, electricity, personality, great quantities of personality. So they all kind of mention the fact that it is kind of a fraud factually.
Yeah. And you know what? That statement, the factually a fraud, that's what made me dig into it more.
Yeah.
And then also start watching some clips of the United States versus Billie Holiday, because I was like, because yeah, and I mean, and I agree with that statement. Just reading more about the actual history, there was a lot that was either not mentioned at all, like people inform people in her life. Also, her love of dogs. Why would they get rid of that? Like,
we don't need that.
She was obsessed with her dogs, and I feel like I was like, I would have loved to have seen just a few dogs in this movie.
Where are the dogs?
I feel like, I don't know, maybe it adds on just a little bit more of her character, just that she is obsessed with her dogs. And in fact, actually, in United States versus Billie Holiday, she has a funeral for her dog, and she's hysterical, she's sobbing. Because at first, when they said like, so in the movie, she's about to have a show, but then there's a poster saying, show canceled tonight, death in the family. And so Jimmy Spector goes to like the funeral where it is, and you think, oh, it's her mom. I was like, oh, it's probably her mom died, because that happened, and I know that happened within that movie. And it's a funeral for her dog that just died.
Okay.
And it was quite funny. Because Lee Daniels did this film, and there's a lot of humor to it, which I was like, this is a little odd, because I'm kind of laughing at this, because she is a complete mess, and then it's her dog, and they're like, wait, what? And I feel like it could have been kind of fun to add that in Lady Sings the Blues, that she just like has all these dogs and is obsessed. But I guess you can forget it.
Well, when a movie is hitting 2.5 hours, I don't necessarily need to more to be added.
Just hold it. It's like,
but you could like have the dog. Yeah.
My
last piece of trivia about the movie is that Motown released a hugely successful soundtrack double album of Diana Ross's recordings of Billie Holiday songs from the film. The album was called Lady Sings the Blues. It went to #1 on the Billboard Top LP and Tape chart for the week ending dates of April 4th and 14th of 1973. So, and that's also, I feel like, kind of like interesting that she would make a movie like Mahogany and that there wouldn't be a soundtrack album that she would be the star of. It kind of makes sense, since she's so well known for being a musical artist, that she would appear in films where she could actually make a soundtrack album that accompanies the movie after it's been out. So that's what happened here with Lady Sings the Blues, which is really cool.
I heard right how that soundtrack just. Also, I think it was huge in the UK, like maybe even bigger in the UK. And I'm like, it would be kind of sad if her version got more popularity than Billie Holiday. I mean, I highly doubt that, but it's funny. I was then listening to Billie Holiday songs when I was working yesterday, and very different. I mean, her voice is much different than what Diana Ross does, and I didn't, when I read how Diana Ross actually kind of wanted to make it more so her own. It was a interesting thought. I was like, okay.
Absolutely. I love the research you do, Andrew. It makes my heart happy that you could just watch the movie and come on here and talk about it, but you're watching The Wiz. You're listening to you're listening to Billie Holiday songs, and you're talking to your mom about them. Like, I love it. It just makes me so happy.
No, of course. No, I mean, yes. No, I mean, I don't want to. I take it seriously, and I want to pay attention and learn as much as I can. I mentioned it before. It's kind of fun. These are movies that I would never even think of watching, or ones I've heard of, and it gives me the opportunity to learn a little bit more. And I was just like, oh my God. I was like, I didn't know Diana Ross's daughter was Tracy Ellis Ross
Tracy Ellis Ross.
on. I was like, I had no idea. And then I see, I'm like, oh my God, it makes, like they have the exact same eyes. I was like, it's kind of fun. It makes me appreciate things more. So
I feel like, I don't know, I can't think off the top of my head what it was. I want to say she presented Diana Ross with an award or something in the last 5 years.
I believe she
did. They stood next to each other on stage, and I was just like, this is awesome. Like you can totally tell she's her daughter. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it must be cool for her also to see her kids like succeed in entertainment too, and have careers of their own.
Yeah, I want to check out I know who her son is. Evan Ross.
Yeah, Evan Ross, I know of because in the 2 years I worked in feature film casting when I used to live in LA. One of our actors that my casting director, she's also I think she still is a manager. She got one of our main clients in a movie with Evan Ross, and I want to say he auditioned for us. Oh, he totally did. I remember Evan Ross auditioned for us for 1 or 2 projects, and I remember him coming in, and I remember my boss turning to me, and she was like, that's Diana Ross's son. I was like, what? That's awesome.
Well, and you know what? I just read, when I was looking them up earlier, he's pretty good friends, or are they dating? Paris Jackson, Michael Jackson's son.
Oh.
Yes.
So a kind of a whiz reunion.
Yeah. Let's see.
The daughter and the son. Were they dating at some point, Paris Jackson and Evan Ross?
You know what? Paris Jackson. It looks like he's married to Ashley Simpson. Never mind.
Evan Ross is married to Ashley Simpson?
So Michael Jackson's daughter, Paris Jackson, 24, cuddles up with Diana Ross's son. Are they?
Oh, maybe they dated at some point?
Paris Jackson joins Ashley Simpson and Evan Ross at Paris. Oh, so I think they're just really good friends. Because he and Ashley Simpson are still married. So.
Oh, okay.
It looks like they went to a wedding together. So, they've been married since 2014, huh?
To Ashley Simpson?
To Ashley Simpson.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
I mean, the last thing I saw, once she did the SNL thing, that's all I heard of her. That's all.
Didn't Evan Ross have some sort of a big movie at some point? Like, I'm trying to think. Like, was he in something? Oh, he was in the Hunger Games. That's what it was.
Yes, he was in Mockingjay Part 1, it says, which.
So he has, let's see, he has a film that came out this year, a film that he's completed. So he's still working on a lot of movies, and he's probably best known for Hunger Games, Mockingjay Part 1 and Part 2. He was in those 2 films.
I wonder what character was he? Mockingjay.
The film that we cast one of our clients in was called 96 Minutes from 2011. J. Michael Trotman, who has been on this podcast.
Oh, cool.
We go back a long way. We talked about Billy Jack last year, and I directed him in a short film when I was making movies down in LA. So we go back, and he came on, and we did an episode together. That was a lot of fun. If you go back to the archives, Billy Jack. And so, he acted. He was like the main lead with Evan Ross in that movie, 96 Minutes from 2011.
Oh, cool.
So there's all sorts of weird stories I have to tell about people I know and how they relate to the film we're talking about today. Any other thoughts on Lady Sings the Blues? I think this is a solid movie. It's a perfect solid. Like 3 stars out of 4. Like it's a 6.5, 7 out of 10 movie. It there's something about it that just it doesn't quite connect where I'm like raving like, oh my God, drop what you're doing. You have to see this. There's something that just by the end, I think it's the Diana Ross performance that I will always take with me. It's fantastic. Yes. The screenplay, the biopic, like some of that factual elements being left out. There's something that just doesn't make it into like a masterpiece. There's something lacking. I agree, yeah. I don't know. I can't even pinpoint really what it is. There's just maybe it's just not as emotionally riveting as it could have been. Like the emotional aspect, we only get some of that towards the end, and I feel like that could have been upped a little bit. I don't know. There's just it's very. There are some scenes that are just kind of that just kind of lumber along, and I'm like trying to find like the through line of like, okay, how is she progressing here? It's a little long. I don't know. It didn't quite all come together in a way that makes me want to say rush out and see it. But if you are, a fan of 70s cinema, it's absolutely worth a look for the Diana Ross performance. It's very important, especially in the Oscar history books too. I would suggest you check it out. Yeah.
Well, and I think for me, what it was is that I feel like they did just touch on some things that I feel like could have been a much stronger element. I think their racism. I mean, I don't want to have a movie focus on the racism of Black people, but I think even like reading more about like some of the stuff she experienced could have been an element to show like what she had, even more of what she had gone through. And it would have added on another level of just like emotional status. And I feel there were a lot of the stuff felt a little just repetitive, like we were seeing the same scene over and over and over again. Because I know she would start on a tour and then she'd get tired, want to go home, and they did that. And then she started a tour, I want to go home, and they did that. They repeated that a lot, and they held on to it very strongly. I feel like her drug use, I think, was honestly probably the strongest element of the film, because they did do a good job of just showing her addiction issues and the way it affected her mental health. And one thing I did get a little confused by was when she was with the piano man, when he was attacked and everything, and she was really out of it. I was like, wait, is she on drugs again? Or is she, because she went to rehab and then she was out of it and then she got good and then all of a sudden she's bad again. And I was like, but they didn't show her back on drugs. I got a little lost on that.
I think she was supposed to be on drugs in that scene, the way she was acting it, right?
Definitely, or maybe alcoholism, but you never really saw her drink. So yeah, I did get a little confused on that aspect because she was so messed up during that, like those 15 minutes of with the piano man, and then when her husband comes to get her, and I was just like, is she on drugs? I don't know. They're not showing. They're not telling us that yet.
Yeah.
And then towards the end, when they show the newspaper clippings while she's performing for the end of the movie, I really liked also that edit was showing the newspaper clippings instead of text saying, on this day, like this happened to her and that happened to her.
Yeah.
Like, that's really kind of what they do today. Seeing the newspaper clippings, and then also, Diana Ross, Billie Holiday, dead at 44. That was like, that it was more powerful. It reminded us that this person was real. And just showing the clippings in newspapers was much more powerful than just like a text. Because also, big pet peeve, whenever a movie shows a fictional movie shows like, this is what the character this is what happened to them afterwards.
With the long text at the end.
Yeah, and I was like, if it's a fictional movie, I was like, get rid of that. We don't. I was just like, they're a fake person. We don't know any of this. But with her, I liked that they showed that. But yeah, I think for me, what's my biggest issue? I got confused on time frames time jumping, and just kind of not telling the audience everything they really need to know, who are now watching it 50 years later.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I forgot to say I did like how they tell us at the end how she died, but we don't get a long death scene. That would have I think we needed to end with that news. Not everyone might know that, but then we get that rousing song she does at the end, and that's the better way to go out on, rather than like fade into her dying on a like that wouldn't have worked for this movie. So I like that they included it though, so that she did die at a young age, but that's not the focus of the end of the movie. It's about her talent and what she brought to the world, and that amazing final song, which I think if Liza Minnelli hadn't have been in the mix, I think Diana Ross would have her Academy Award
for sure.
I really fun to talk about this one with you, and I recommend it to people. I think it's worth a look. It's definitely in the top half of the films I've looked at for the podcast for 72.
Yeah.
All right, so that takes us to our final two segments. The first one, the Divine Double Feature. I went with the United States versus Billie Holiday. That made the most sense to me. Yep. I was like thinking of, okay, what are some musical biopics I've liked of the last 5 years? And that one just, because the whole idea of the Divine Double Feature is, what's a film 50 years later that could kind of be an interesting compare and contrast? How do you get more interesting than a movie that's 49 years later from a major director, Oscar-nominated performance as Billie Holiday? That's a really cool way to compare and contrast. How do we tell her story in the early 70s versus the early 2020s? That's a really interesting experiment. So I think that's like the only like sensible option. So,
I 100% agree. That's exactly what I was gonna say. I was like watching United States versus Billie Holiday now. It's so interesting to see what they're telling in 2021, what they probably couldn't tell in 1972.
Right.
Yeah. So I completely agree. That was my pick as well. I was like, Rocket Man was really good, and it went through his whole life, and
Rocket Man,
which was wonderful. And then I was like, I Tanya was also amazing, which I just watched the first time, which I'm surprised I didn't watch it earlier.
Oh, that's good.
Just thinking, and that's a very different style of storytelling for a biopic anyway.
My other idea was if you didn't do that one, my other idea was Dreamgirls from 2006, musical, black ensemble, lots of Oscar nominations. Jennifer Hudson won the Oscar for supporting actress. I just made a video for my YouTube channel about best supporting actor that year, which came down to Alan Arkin for Little Miss Sunshine versus Eddie Murphy for Dreamgirls. Eddie Murphy won almost every award leading up to Oscar night, and then Alan Arkin won for Little Miss Sunshine, because that movie, I think, it kind of like took hold of Academy voters. Everyone really loved that movie. So I think he beat Eddie Murphy just by a smidge there at the end. But Dreamgirls is a really strong film, and that could be a cool double feature idea as well.
And I think, and with that as well, with Beyonce, she wasn't acting too much. So I feel like it's very much the same.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Diana Ross going to acting, Beyonce going to acting. I feel like that would be a great comparison.
That is a great, I'm so glad you mentioned that. That's absolutely right. So her big film breakthrough was Austin Powers and Goldmember in 2002.
Yeah, 19. She was 19.
19, which she comes across as like a 7-year-old in that movie. That she was 19.
Cleopatra.
And then she's what's it called? She's in a 2003 kind of musical. It's like The Fighting Temptations or something like that. And then does she have a film? Let me just pull her up real quick. Does she have a film between?
Has a horror one.
She has a horror one.
Obsessed. Yes. Yeah.
So she kind of comes onto the scene in a huge comedy hit with Austin Powers. And then it is kind of the Diana Ross thing of like, okay, I'm gonna make a film career. I'm more known for my music, and I'm gonna keep doing that. So I got it right. It was called The Fighting Temptations in 2003. That movie is just as kind of so-so. And then she's in The Pink Panther in 2006 with Steve Martin.
Oh yeah.
So she shows off some more comedy chops, and then her big kind of lady sings the blues moment is Dreamgirls. She's the lead of that movie. She gets the Golden Globe nomination for Best Actress in Musical or Comedy, loses to Meryl Streep for The Devil Wears Prada, which was going to be a hard performance to beat. And I would say for most of 2006, the talk was that Beyonce is coming for her first Oscar nomination in the lead actress category. And then Dreamgirls kind of underperforms, doesn't get in for picture or director, does not get a nomination for Beyonce. And there's actually, I've watched it a lot because I made a video about it. When Alan Arkin wins the Oscar for Little Miss Sunshine, Eddie Murphy kind of does a little, kind of a half-hearted clap. And there's a wide shot of Alan Arkin coming up to the stage, and Beyonce is the only one sitting there not clapping for him.
Man,
even Jennifer Hudson is clapping for Alan Arkin, but Beyonce sitting there with her hands down, not clapping for him at all. She clearly wanted Eddie Murphy to win that, so she wasn't happy. I always wonder what that would have been like for her that award season, because everyone was telling her for all of 2006 Beyonce, you're going to get the Oscar nomination. This is going to be your first Oscar.
Oh, yeah.
And then she doesn't get it, but then she watches Jennifer Hudson win everything for the same movie. That must have been kind of hard for Beyonce that award season to see someone else from her movie kind of sweeping. And then she's in Cadillac Records in 2008, and then she's in Obsessed from 2009, which is a fun guilty pleasure, the horror film.
Oh, yeah.
Obsessed.
Oh, so
kind of a thriller. And then that's kind of it, right? It's like she's a voice in some stuff. She's a voice in Lion King.
Yeah.
But Dreamgirls was kind of her Lady Sings the Blues moment. And then the movie underperformed slightly at the box office, didn't do as well as it was supposed to Oscar season. And then she makes a couple more movies. And then the last decade plus, she's really put all her focus on music. So it is kind of like a Diana Ross trajectory there.
Exactly. And it's now I'm thinking of Lady Gaga with Stars Born, how Lady that was Gaga? Like her, and that was her first. I mean, and she's phenomenal in that. And do you think Beyonce will win an Oscar in the future if she, does any more
maybe
acting?
For a song? Didn't she get an Oscar nomination recently for a song? It like opened one of the recent ceremonies. I remember her singing at one of them.
Yes, she did. I wonder if she got nominated for Spirit in Lion King.
So since Obsessed, what a good one to go out on, right? She has not acted in a live action movie since Obsessed in 2009. Wow. And then she has one Oscar nomination for Best Original Song for King Richard from last year. The Will Smith
yes.
For the song Be Alive. I believe it played over the end credits.
Yes.
And she the last ceremony was in March. She opened the ceremony with I think it was pre-recorded. I don't think it was live. She pre-recorded
I think it was pre-recorded,
recording of Be Alive. That's how they opened the show in March. So that's her first Oscar nomination.
Who won that for best song? Yeah.
Who won best song? Me and all my Oscar knowledge, and then a few months go by, and then it's all gone. It's out of my. I did pretty well with my. I think I got 21 out of 24. I was pretty happy with that.
Wow.
I mean, mostly because I just marked Dune for everything, and Dune won everything.
Oh, so Dune won everything.
I was like, this is easy. So who beat?
Dune was fine.
Who beat Beyonce? Let's see here. So I just pulled up it was a lot of Dune winning. Encanto it wasn't Encanto. Best documentary feature. Here we go. So best original score went to Dune. Best original song, of course, went to James Bond. No Time to Die, Billie Eilish.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Which I didn't remember off the top of my head because I don't think I never remember that James Bond movies win Oscars for best song, but the last three have. All three. Skyfall by Adele, Spectre, and then
Smith.
Yeah. And then now No Time to Die. So if Beyonce really wants to win an Oscar, she needs to do the song for the next James Bond movie.
Yeah, honestly, I guess so. Whenever we get a new James Bond. Yeah.
So United States versus Billie Holiday, a great choice. And then that takes us to the last segment, Beyond the Flick. This is probably the only time I'll talk about Diana Ross on Film at 50. So I just had a few more little facts about her life.
Yeah.
We've talked about her 3 films. Her TV movies from the 90s are called Out of Darkness from 94, which got her a Golden Globe nomination. And then her last big live action film appearance, 1999, a film called Double Platinum with Brandy as her daughter, I think.
Interesting.
So that's it. So I want to know, like, what happened in 92, 93, where she said, I'm going to make another movie. I'm going to star in another film, and it's going to be a TV film. I wonder if she wanted to do it, if they came to her. Like, I can't imagine 15 years after The Wiz, she was like, all of a sudden had the bug to go back to make a movie, especially for TV. So that would have been interesting. I don't know. But it's nice to know that she's in a couple other things past The Wiz. So we talked about her rising to fame as lead singer of the Supremes. That group had 12 #1 hit singles, including Where Did Our Love Go? That is a great song. Baby Love and Love Child.
Baby Love.
She embarked on a solo career in 1970. She was named the Female Entertainer of the Century by Billboard in 1976. Since her solo career began in 1970, she has released 25 studio albums, singles, and compilations. Her albums, her everything, have sold more than 100 million records worldwide.
Wow,
that's pretty good.
25 albums.
She has done since 1970 25 studio albums.
Wow, that's insane.
So I don't know if that's all new songs. Maybe some of those are like compilations and like, greatest hits, stuff like that. Probably.
I guess like Wiz, and then also
so I think Lady Sings the Blues, that album would be one of them. Yeah.
And I guess all the Supremes and all that stuff. That makes sense. Okay.
She is the only, it's a lot. She is the only female artist to have had #1 singles on the Billboard Hot 100 as a solo artist, as the other half of a duet, as a member of a trio, and as an ensemble member. In 2021, Billboard ranked her the 30th greatest Hot 100 artists of all time. So what's going on here? We're going from the greatest artist of the century to number 30?
Yeah.
What's happening here, Billboard? Come on now.
We have questions.
Her hits as a Supreme and a solo artist combined put Ross among the top 5 artists on the Billboard Hot 100 singles charts from 55 to 2018. She had a top 10 UK hit in every one of the last 5 decades and sang lead on a top 75 hit single at least once every year from 1964 to 1996. In 1988, she was inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of the Supremes. She was the recipient of a special Tony Award in 1976, the Kennedy Center Honors in 2007, the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 2012, and the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2016. So she's had quite the career.
Oh, yeah.
That goes way beyond movies. This is like a little, like the film side of her career is just a little sliver.
Yeah,
but
very minimal.
A lot of musical artists who dip their toe into film, most of them don't get an Oscar nomination for Best Actress, and Diana Ross managed to do it. So that's really cool. So that takes us to the end here, Andrew. This was so much fun to talk about Diana Ross and Lady Sings the Blues. We'll definitely do a horror film next time. I have an idea of what we could do.
I know. Well, Scream 2, 25th anniversary.
Yes. So that's what I was going to talk to you about. I didn't want you to have to say it on the recorded just in case you change your mind. But I would love to do. So last year we did a bunch of bonus episodes, and my life got so crazy in 2022 that I had to let something go, and that was the bonus episodes of Film at 50. So I just do the Friday regular episodes of the podcast, and there also wasn't much for 2022 looking back at some milestones of like 1992, 1997, 2002. There wasn't like a movie that I was like, I have to do a anniversary episode. The only one that I'm kind of sad I didn't do was Death Becomes Her, celebrated 30 years in July, and I love that movie. I ended up writing a piece about it for Gold Derby instead, so I ended up just doing it for that. But I can't let this year go by without doing a special episode about Scream 2, which turns 25 in December. So I thought if you wanted to do that chat, we'll try to keep it shorter than the 2.5 hours we talked about Scream last year. But no promises.
No promises at all. I mean, Scream 2 is phenomenal. So,
and I haven't seen Scream 2 in a while. It's been at least. Oh man, I didn't watch. So I didn't watch the first 4 before I saw the new Scream.
I did.
Yeah, I know you did.
I have to. I mean, it's October, so I have to watch number 1, number 2, probably number 4 and 5. I just watched number 4, so maybe not.
So I thought I would drop that bonus episode in early December to coincide with the 25th anniversary, but I thought it'd be fun if we can to get as close as we can to Halloween and rewatch Scream 2 and talk about it here would be a lot of fun. So maybe later this month we could do that.
Absolutely, I'm down.
And that's one I don't have to do too much research. It's just all in my head.
I mean, really? Oh yeah, that's an easy one. I'm just like already. Yeah. I was and actually, my boyfriend is gone for he's gone until October 28th now. He's back home visiting family, so he's gone forever. So I've done nothing.
Oh, that's right. I saw you you posted something about how your boyfriend was going to be gone for a while. I didn't know it was a month. That's a long time.
Yeah, he's gone for he left on left September 18th and 16th, and he's gone for about 5 weeks. So
how you doing with that?
It's okay. I mean, I've been so busy, and I keep myself occupied, and it's also Halloween time, so my like I mean, of course, I love spending time with him, but like sometimes I just want to watch my scary movie at night. But like, but
yeah,
you know, when we're together, we're very active people, so we always want to go out and do something. Go out, like, you know,
right.
Days off or time off can always be minimal.
You have to leave and go do stuff. Yeah.
Yes, but I love the idea of watching some scary. To watch I watched Creep 2 the other night, and I was like, I've been wanting to watch that for a year now, so I finally got to.
He's already watched it. He's ready. So maybe the week, maybe like the October 21st weekend or something. We could do it before he comes back and makes you go do stuff again.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I'll be in Portland then. I'm going to Portland.
Oh, okay.
To see my friends, and we're also going to the Halloween Town, where they filmed Halloween Town, which I'm very excited for. They set up the pumpkin in front of the Times Square every year, so I'm excited to go do that. We'll figure it out for sure.
We'll figure it out. But anything you wanted to promote or tell our listeners where they can find you online, now would be the time.
Yeah, nothing really to promote. Yeah, I'm on social media, AR Campbell 94 on pretty much everything. Not too much going on. So
So if you enjoyed this episode, go back into the archives. We have a bunch of talks we've done about horror films, and
4 or 5,
Sunday Bloody Sunday is a really good one from 2021. We recorded that last year, and stay tuned for a chat about Scream 2. If you're a horror fan, Wes Craven fan, if you love the franchise, we both adore this franchise. Last December, we talked 2.5 hours about Scream on its 25th anniversary. And so we got to come back and talk about Scream 2. There's so much to dig into with Scream 2. So that'll be coming up here in December.
Cool.
All right. So thanks for being here again, Andrew. Thanks to all of you for listening. You can find us online at filmat50.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Check out my YouTube channel, Brian Rowe Video. And until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.